Our next item is the Old Town Scottsdale Policy Regulatory and Guideline Update. We, as council, requested this, and our presenter is Brad Carr, Planning and Development Area Manager.
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. As you mentioned, Brad Carr with the Planning Department. Before I move on, I also want to note my colleague Adam Yaron, who can't be here tonight, but will continue to be on this project as we move forward. So again, as you mentioned, staff is here in front of you this evening to discuss the Old Town Character Area Plan and associated documents as a result of a work study session that council had with staff on June 22nd. At that session, council gave some feedback on some items they would like the staff to address as part of an update to the Old Town Plan. And so this evening, staff is bringing forward some consideration for council to initiate an update to that plan, that 2018 Old Town Plan, as well as an associated text amendment to the downtown overlay and plan block development zoning districts and any other affected sections as applicable, an amendment to the downtown infill incentive district, and finally some direction to staff on an update to the Old Town Scottsdale urban design and architectural guidelines. Just so we can reestablish ourselves as what document we're looking at here, the 2018 Old Town Character Area Plan, that's the most recent update to this plan. It establishes the city's visions and values for our Old Town area. It also shapes the physical form through various goals and policies through that document. And it consists of 5 chapters that house those goals and policies, including land use, character and design, mobility, arts and culture, and economic vitality. So as a result of what we heard from council at that June 22nd meeting, staff is bringing forward some considerations for you tonight as far as updates to that actual Old Town Plan. As you can see on the screen here, that includes looking at quality new development and redevelopment in the downtown area as part of our outreach and ongoing efforts with this. Also considering the development type designations, locations, and transitions of those development types, as well as looking at our list of land uses and the location of land uses within our Old Town area, the districts and development type designations, making sure those are clear and concise. Also, we want to make sure that the document has an emphasis on providing more interconnected and public open space. We also want to ensure that what we heard from the council was making sure that we provide enhanced focus on transportation, infrastructure, sustainability, tourism, and economic development. That's all within the plan. And finally, looking at reviewing that naming convention of downtown versus Old Town, making sure there's no confusion on the use of those naming conventions within the document. As I mentioned, a companion to an update to the Old Town Plan, we'll also be looking at an update to our zoning ordinance. As many of you know, the zoning ordinance is our implementation tool for all the city's various general plans and character area plans. So within the document itself, this outlines our regulatory guidance for development within the Old Town area, specifically within the downtown overlay, and PBD or plan block development areas of the zoning ordinance. So for considerations on updates within the zoning ordinance, staff is going to be reviewing the ability perhaps to provide more or stronger development requirements within the zoning ordinance and our guidelines, the use of development flexibility within the zoning ordinance and our guidelines, maintaining, adding, or restricting, or even removing zoning ordinance base and or bonus development standards, a reconsideration of zoning ordinance bonus provisions if they are to be maintained in order to provide greater and better defined public benefits, as well as re-examining bonus payment calculations. And again, I want to reiterate that these are all items that we, as staff, gained from you during your initial discussion of this on June 22nd, both these zoning ordinance considerations and those of the Old Town Plan considerations themselves. So I want to take a moment here to talk about how this update fits within the city's organizational strategic plan of 2021-2022, specifically the item that's on the right there, that topic of support economic vitality, and more precisely the item to improve quality and consistency of proposed development in Old Town, review and update the Old Town Character Area Plan was part of the goals and objectives of the council with the date of October 31st, 2021 for review. The Old Town Strategic Plan and that specific goal was drafted prior to that June 22nd meeting, and as a result, staff hasn't really had any direction to work on this until after that meeting and bring forward this item until tonight on August 24th for initiation. As such, because we feel like that we want to maintain best practices in outreach and continued input from the community as well as council and our commissions and boards of commissions, we are looking to extend that date beyond October 31st, 2021 to a March 2022 completion date in order to take into account those best practices with public participation. That's about a 6-month total time frame as we look at it at this point. So what is that planned public participation that we're anticipating at this point? Again, we're in front of you tonight for possible initiation. Our next session with you would probably be in September on the 21st with a City Council work study session, followed shortly by a Planning Commission non-action session, which is similar to a work study session. Then we would proceed into our public outreach phase, which is October through December is what we're anticipating. Would include 6 open houses, several sets of virtual open houses, some focus groups with our property owners and business owners in the downtown, as well as the results of that would be additional time with the Planning Commission, again, in more of a work study session and City Council as well. Once we wrap that up, when we get all that data into our, and we get that input, we're going to move forward towards the actual public hearing process of hearing these cases through City Council, one final work session with them and Planning Commission before we head to Planning Commission for recommendation and City Council adoption in March of 2022. So again, tonight, staff is in front of you for your input and consideration of initiating a non-major general plan amendment to our Old Town Plan, Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan. Again, associated with that is initiating a text amendment to our downtown zoning districts, initiation of the amendment to the Downtown Infill Incentive District, and finally directing staff to update the Old Town Scottsdale Urban Design and Architectural Guidelines as necessary. A note on that final topic, the architectural guidelines are not necessarily a purview of the City Council. Those are generally reviewed and then ultimately approved by our Development Review Board. So what we're anticipating is that kind of lagging a little bit behind any changes that ultimately get adopted by Council through the Old Town Plan and the zoning ordinance. So that would be a further implementation of that update by updating the architectural guidelines through our DRB. Again, that concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you. At this point, I would like to call for public comment, and then we will, after that, go to council questions and then proceed this way. So I show in person Bob Henchman.
Thank you, Mayor Ortega, council members. I'm Bob Pejman. The address is on the record. And last week I sent a list of developments in Scottsdale to the council. It covered the developments that were either built since 2015 or they're currently in the pipeline. Today I want to focus on the downtown portion of this. Does the overhead work? Okay, this is a 1 square mile area. It's not a big area, and this is what has happened since 2015. Almost 1,000 units have been built. There's not much as far as under construction and pending approval right now, about 200, but there are almost 1,500 units that are approved but not built. But they will be built because they have been approved and they have been zoned. Next slide focuses on what's in the pipeline. There are currently almost 1,700, or rather 1,700 units that are in the pipeline, almost 2,200 bedrooms, a rough number. The list is pretty well known. Museum Square, Collection, Canalside, Goldwater, Waterview, Kimsey, Scottsdale Residences, Artisan. That's what's in the pipeline, not built yet. Next, we want to go to the commercial mixed use. The two primary ones are the Collection, the Scottsdale Collection, the Marquee. Almost 851,000 square feet that are approved, not built. But they will be built. Downtown hotels. There are 2 hotels that are under construction. There are 3 that are approved, not built yet. The list is well known: Museum Square, Winfield, Kimsey, Caesar, Dunn and Charlie. Summary, about 1,700 or 1,700 units residential, commercial mixed use 851,000, about 1,000 hotel rooms, keys. We have not yet seen the impact of these projects on traffic, water supply, heat island effect, infrastructure, sewer capacity, and the impact of the construction. I think that when the council members that say downtown is a growth area, and I agree, it's a growth area, but you have so much growth already approved that's not built. When we look at new projects, we have to consider what's in the pipeline, because otherwise we are approving every project almost like it's the only game in town, and it's not. All this stuff is coming. It's just been delayed because of COVID, and it's coming. All of this has to be put into the equation, or else we may be over-approving and not accounting for the impacts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Bastien Android.
Good evening, Mayor Ortega, members of the council. My name is Bastien Androuet, here on behalf of the Arizona Multi-Housing Association, located at 818 North 1st Street, Phoenix, Arizona, 85004. Today, I speak to you in regards to the Old Town Scottsdale Policy Regulatory and Guideline Update. The AMA, which represents owners, operators, and developers of over 26,000 rentable housing units in Scottsdale, just wants to caution the council against proposing detrimental amendments to the 2018 Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan without the input of the very owners, operators, and developers who revitalized downtown Scottsdale and enabled unparalleled growth for an area previously suffering from a shrinking economy. Any action reducing density and height allowances for new housing developments and reversing the more recent reforms enacted in 2010 and 2018 to the city's zoning code will further exacerbate Arizona's housing shortages. As noted by the Wall Street Journal less than 2 months ago, the United States is millions of housing units behind current demand. In Arizona, this translates to a pre-pandemic need of approximately 230,000 new units. Roughly 50,600 of those in Scottsdale alone, just to match current demand per a 2019 Elliott D. Pollock and Company study. It's also important to consider the economic impact of a multifamily development. For example, a 250-unit multifamily development construction generates $1.2 million for the city of Scottsdale, with an estimated additional $415,000 in ongoing annual revenues. This means that if all 50,600 new units were built, the city would stand to gain approximately $247 million in construction revenues, equaling an additional $84 million in ongoing annual revenue by 2030. Furthermore, a recent New York University study uncovered that for every 10% increase in the housing stock, rents decrease 1% and sales prices also decrease within 500 feet in New York, with a similar study of San Francisco identifying that rents fall by 2% for parcels within 100 meters of new construction. Renters' risk of displacement to a lower-income neighborhood falls by 17%. Further, by imposing any additional height and density restrictions, the city opens itself to another potential battle with the Arizona legislature, which, as stated in my previous letter, passed Senate Bill 1409 earlier this year. This new law was passed in response to zoning regulations that have added to the cost of housing construction over the years and have contributed to the state's more recent housing affordability issues. The new law reads as follows. Before adopting any zoning ordinance or zoning ordinance text amendment of general applicability, the legislative body of a municipality shall consider the probable impact of the proposed zoning ordinance or text amendment on the cost to construct housing for sale or rent. SB 1409 serves as a reminder that the state is now actively examining barriers to housing development and is prepared to take remedial action. I solely mention remedial action, as just earlier today the Arizona Republic published an article speaking to the intent of this ordinance and subsequent actions to limit development in Old Town Scottsdale. Again, local policymakers should be considering ways to reduce barriers to housing construction rather than creating new ones. For these reasons and many more, the AMA cautions the city against moving forward with changes to the Old Town Character Area Plan, especially those that will result in further barriers to increasing the supply of housing in downtown Scottsdale. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, I will close public comment on this issue. And I will start council input, which is why we're here today, to provide input, and then let that be tested in the community. First of all, the three areas of decisions are to allow staff to take whatever we propose forward to the community. For me, transportation, infrastructure, sustainability, and actually the identity of Scottsdale, which is also tourist-based, all have to be taken into account. Often quoted, economic vitality is somehow weighted more over these four areas. But I can assure you that there is no economic vitality with traffic gridlock, with overstressed infrastructure, with a choking, unsustainable heat island, or the blading of the legacy part of Scottsdale, which visitors and eventual residents have come to know. So, looking at economic vitality, as a city, it's our duty to be sure that it would meet those areas. The Old Town Character Area Plan is certainly subject to revision. Page 14 of the document itself said, hey, open it up and see whether it's performing and see how it's performing. That's page 14. The Old Town Character Area architectural guidelines are also in effect. And once again, there is a caution to see whether or not projects that have been approved have met those guidelines or not. Because now we have some projects to consider as well. The PBD and the downtown overlay zoning ordinance are on the table as well. So we're actually looking at actual changes and recommendations that are coming from us as individuals and which may come forward through the public process. As I checked last, there is not one new car lane, transportation lane in Scottsdale. As I look at the approvals for past projects, I do not see a master plan, mega plan for how we can keep up with all of the growth, and certainly we have a water issue as well. But I think it's important that we look at what we are not, I repeat, not considering right now as we provide our input as it moves forward. We're not deliberating to change any existing vested, approved upzoning that's already of record. If it's there, it had some rules, it may have had some waivers, it may have had some variances. It exists. We are not here to change those vested rights. We are also not, and I think one speaker alluded to it, looking at apartment dwellings outside of the Old Town Scottsdale character area. So we get a lot of comments about the replacement of commercial properties along Scottsdale Road and Hayden, converting them and eroding the commercial existing zoning for apartments. We're not going to talk about that. It's not what we're getting to. We're also not specifically looking at the general plan 2035 because we've already forwarded the text for the general plan. I do want to point out on page 185 of the general plan that's going to the voters, it is specific and it does cross-reference the Old Town Scottsdale character area plan. This is what it says. Building heights generally range between 2 and 6 stories depending on location and district context and may exceed 6 stories in certain areas identified in the Old Town Scottsdale character area plan. At the center of the Old Town growth area is the downtown core. The downtown core is identified, described, and identified by specific boundary in the Old Town character area plan as pedestrian-oriented, includes downtown's historic legacy and heritage, specialty retail, art galleries, restaurants, public art, and the highest concentration of individually designed historic buildings found in the city. In contrast to the majority of the area, the downtown core is comprised of the lowest intensity of development in all of Old Town. The small lot development pattern actively at ground level land uses and pedestrian focuses on the downtown core are some of the primary elements that give Old Town its most identifiable character. That's in the general plan. We're not amending that, but that's part of why. And then it says cross-reference Old Town Scottsdale character area plan. So the subject that we have today is an independent evaluation of some decisions which were made in 2018, and now they're not theoretical anymore. They may have supposed that certain properties could have gone up to 160 feet or 120 feet, added another character level area, and it was essentially not tested. Okay? It was not tested. However, you don't have to look far in the Old Town Character Area Plan. In fact, it's page 4, executive summary, states, achieve the community's vision of a dynamic city center which recognizes its Western heritage while boldly looking to its metropolitan future. It's right there, page 4. Metropolitan future. Metropolis, by common definition, is the highest density core which dominates the area. It's typically supercharged with transportation options, and typically the metropolitan future or metropolis, if you look at the definition, says it relates to New York City, Boston, LA, or Chicago. What I'm saying today is that the script of the Old Town and the consistency of the current Old Town Character Area Plan speaks to a metropolitan future, and it's consistent throughout that. However, most residents came to Scottsdale to leave the metropolitan past. They didn't come to Scottsdale to recreate a metropolis here. Now, we're not interested, I am not interested in looking into a metropolitan future, which can be described, and you can look at all of the urban tests which have been sociologically looked at and think that that is an adequate direction that my city and our city wants to go in. On the contrary, the identity of Scottsdale is low profile, low density, open vistas. It's part of our general plan. It's been written in there, and frankly, the general plan, the valid one that occurs right now, is the General Plan 2001. 2001 is more valid than the Character Area Plan, in my opinion, of 2018, because there was no supporting document at 2010 when they had a chance to do the general plan and look at those issues before they started re-expressing Scottsdale in our metropolitan future. The version of a metropolis which the council approved in July 20th, 2018, has actual metrics which can be weighed. For instance, what those decisions did was modify the 2009 criteria when there were only two types, 1 and 2. They added type 2.5 and type 3. It was recognized in the 2009 downtown plan update that areas north of the canal might ask for 150 feet. And it was recognized that the hospital, which was already, at quite a height, was also recognized within that document. But again, there's no substitute for a general plan. There's no substitute for dialogue that decides what kind of density and what kind of transportation obligations we're going to make. So let's look at a few actual examples. For instance, the marquee. The marquee, and as I make these statements, they may be applicable to either the zoning as it comes forward in some questions. They may be applicable to the architectural standards, and they certainly are in the intent document that we're rewriting at this present time or asking to rewrite, which is the Old Town Character Area Plan. The marquee did not conform with the step-back requirements of the architectural guidelines or the General Plan 2001. It did not. There was a project called the Canal Side, putting 54 units, apartment units, on commercial property on Fifth Avenue. There was not one guest parking space. I think there were 2 guest parking spaces. But technically, they were all in sight behind a gate. Southbridge 2 was so oversized in all the loopholes, the public objected to it, and finally the applicant withdrew it. Now, step 1 that this council took in really looking and critical thinking about what's happening in the Old Town, I got a little bug, was the analysis of the citywide parking ordinance. And parking ordinance was modified, studied and modified. I'm going to get that guy. On May 14th. And it was effective June 14th. And it was very significant citywide because it also required guest parking for apartments and dwelling units. It also applies to the Old Town Character Area. And one of the things that we passed was that the parking in the mixed-use area should retain at least 20% commercial use. That is part of the zoning code for our parking criteria. Now, when we have a case like Canal Side, which can say, well, they used the loophole that said they didn't need any guest parking, and they were approved converting commercial property on Fifth Avenue, placing those units on stilts. So all you have as a pedestrian walking on Fifth Avenue is car parking underneath an apartment building. That violates, in my opinion, the General Plan 2001. I helped write it. I think that's what we cared about, that we had some interactivity. In that case, again, I'm not being theoretical about it. Canal Side ended up with 98.2% residential use, and the so-called mixed use was 900 square feet for a slushy Servy bar or something on the ground floor. Now that doesn't support economic vitality of a very unique and special place. That's an exact, that's all factual. When it came to the Southbridge 2 asked for the open space along the canal. You can read it in here. It says preserve public space as much as you can. But it was basically sold and bartered for private property, and the city would have lost 18 feet of the canal area. That was an actual project. It not only would crowd the canal in the open space, it also would have taken property into the street underground, disrupted traffic on the other, for the merchants on the other side. That project was approved. And it took a referendum to really overturn it until it went away. When you look at that project, it also violated the setbacks, step-backs, the architectural guidelines that were part of consideration. Didn't have a podium. It was vertical. I'll point out another one. Consider the Canopy Hotel. It pretty much went vertical. We understand that. But one of the most, let's just say, profound, you might say insignificant, but really added to the character of this city, is covered walkways. The Canopy Hotel only put canopy over its own entrance. It should have had walkways so that as you walk from Bippo to Pippo or wherever, 2nd Street, to the Museum of the West, you'd have that invitation to do that. You see the same thing on South Bridge Original. The guidelines for walkways have been in our books. It's been part of the character of Scottsdale since '86 when we put it in there, and I was part of that too. And they say, now if you look at South Bridge Original, they put in 30-inch round concrete columns on 1/3 of the buildings. The other third have no covered walkways. Now this was built, and the other third of the building has 2 by 2 or 3, say 2 by 3 square masonry columns. Now this isn't a walkway. And they're in threesies. There's like 3 of them together. You can't even hardly put your hand through between them. I mean, you're creating everything that is the antithesis of what we want or expect. And then, several years later, South Bridge 2, they project, 4 by 8 foot columns in these walkway areas. All you have to do is open the book on the requirement of why is Scottsdale so inviting? It's because of those walkways, and they've been overlooked. Go to the Sugar Bowl. They don't even have columns. That was built in 1958. I expanded it another 75 feet. They are a triangular cantilever and people love it, and you got all the view of what's going on. Go to any shopping center. How many shopping centers have no covered walkways? Come on. All of these areas scale and need to scale in support to make, it's true that private property begins at the property line, but Scottsdale has always asked for that covered walkway. Scottsdale has always given rights to and encouraged that to happen, but not with 4x4 big columns. And Southbridge had some even larger ones bumped in there. At the original Southbridge, they had these enormous columns, and they're supporting one story above it. You could support 15 stories on those columns. So this is the level of concern that I have, and we'll be opening up again several of these areas. I haven't split them into different, whether it's a zoning situation or rewriting it, but these are essential. And frankly, when the downtown guidelines that show transition and told the DR board that there shall be a type 2, type 1, then a type 2, and then a type 3, and the mapping shows directly from a type 1 to a type 3, to me, the mapping has to be corrected. That's our job. Because it is semi-fraudulent to say, well, this is the way it's going to be on the architectural guidelines, and then, oh yeah, I can show you 4 or 5 projects when those rules were all broken. So let's get real here and decide all of these particulars. It will go forward, and it needs to be aired publicly. There are other comments that I hope you'll take notes from. I don't know if there's any zoning attorneys listening. Oh, wait. Let's go on to Councilwoman Whitehead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to go ahead and focus on the city requirements on ourselves and not address what we might want to do with our developer partners to make sure our downtown is the best it can be. So I definitely want to deliver. Pretty much every page and every other page talks about the need for open space. And honestly, as if on cue, Scottsdale Progress today had an article identifying South Scottsdale as hotter. And, of course, they identified one of the solutions as open space. So there's a lot of talk in this document about open space. Nothing has happened, but there is one particular opportunity that would kind of tick off a lot of different priorities in one initiation of a park. So I would like staff to come back and specify, or I would like my input from my colleagues about having a canal-level park on the only remaining public parcel we have on the canal while retaining the public parking that we have. So that would be Fifth Avenue and Goldwater. And that would serve multiple purposes. It would definitely cool down our city, our downtown area. It will provide connectivity, pedestrian connectivity, place to stop. It will extend our corridor, or wildlife corridor along the canal. So definitely that is a top priority. I'll be looking for that. We can't talk about open space unless we're actually going to do it. Then I thought maybe some more, again, specificity in the, there's a lot of discussion about trees, and again, pedestrian connectivity comes after open spaces being identified again and again and again. So staff, thank you, is working on, I think, both the tree canopy plan and the emerald necklace. I wonder if we want to just include that so that people know what they're, when you go out to the public for these meetings, they get used to our kind of clever phrase that's been around for a while and recognize that that's part of this pedestrian connectivity that also works nicely with wildlife connectivity. Let me see what other items I had. I would like to add a section on alleys. we're getting a lot of feedback, and that's wasted space right now. And while wouldn't it be nice if we have lighting and clean and somehow alleys make better use of that valuable open space. And I think other than, I do have some ideas. I'll wait for my colleagues on what can we do with our private partners to make it so that we're working together to create the downtown that is described in our general plan and described in both the 35 and 01 plan and meets all of the requirements that we set forth to make the downtown as, a destination that it's always been. So I'll stop with that for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Chaddick and then Councilmember Milhaven.
Thank you, Mayor. As I listened to what the mayor had to say, I thought it was very interesting because I've gone through all these pages, just like I did with the general plan. I have about 20 suggested edits. And one thing that really bothered me was the use of the word metropolitan, and I did look it up in the dictionary. We are not a Chicago. We are not a New York. And I think most of us would agree we don't want to be a Chicago or New York. We want to be Scottsdale. So that was one point that, thank you for making it. My second point is we have rules, we have guidelines. And darn it, people come and they say, well, I want it type 3, and then there's a type 1 next to it, and then we have the rules for the transition. But you know what? We don't follow them. We make exceptions to it. There's supposed to be a certain distance between type 1 and type 3. But, it's not there, so it's okay. We can reduce the step backs and the step ups. It's okay, and that's what we have continued to do. And that is what is affecting the appreciation of Scottsdale and what many of us feel is the value to the tourist when they come to our city. So those are just a couple things. Another thing that I think we definitely can work on is a point that was brought up by an owner in Waterfront Towers. He looked over our downtown and he said, look at all that dirt. We shouldn't have dirt in those empty lots. If the developer buys it, if a person buys it, and they don't develop it within a certain length of time, darn it, put some rocks down, get some public artwork, and make it look decent. You walk through the city, and I am ashamed when I see these dirt lots. That is not Scottsdale, and that's not even an expensive fix. That's a cheap fix. So I think we need to emphasize that as well. I agree, Solange, open spaces, parks, which enrich the neighborhood. And of course, I have quite a few other things. I don't like the emphasis on the word vertical. Every time we talk about development, is that the only way to develop? Make it 150 feet tall? It needs to fit in the neighborhood. And I would say on page 19, there's a picture. And they're trying to tell us that in that picture, the modern office building in the background that sits next to Cavallari's blacksmith shop is a perfect example of transition from type 1 to type 3. No, it's not. It looks terrible. They took some of the brickwork from the blacksmith shop and trimmed the tall building with it, and then you're telling me that's compatible? Just look at it. It's two different types of architecture. It's not okay. If we could follow our own rules, we would be in a better situation now. And I think the whole purpose of reviewing this document is to make sure that we re-emphasize the rules we have in place and, darn it, follow them. We are not the United States government where they never follow any of the rules. We're Scottsdale. We thought about the rules. We worked on them. We had community input. Now it's time we followed them and respected them. And I think that's been missing for several years because everybody was willing to get away with it, close their eyes, pass it off. I don't think we want that anymore. So I would say the first thing we need to start with is review our rules and follow those rules. Thank you.
Councilmember Milhaven and then Councilmember Durham.
Well, it's pretty clear my colleagues disagree with a lot of decisions that were made in the past. And it's certainly their prerogative now that they sit in these chairs to approve or not approve whatever projects or exceptions that they choose to, just as anyone who sits in these chairs in the future will decide for themselves based on their vision and what their constituents believe need to happen within our city. So we can modify rules all we want, but we can't bind a future council. Rather than speak to the content of the plan, I think tonight is really more about process and what the timing would be and the outreach, because I think whatever we do, and whether you like the current plan or not, it is the product of extensive public outreach and public input. And so I think that if we're going to consider any changes to the plan, we need to also do that. But at the same time, we are sending a general plan to the voters, and we have been challenged in the past to get that general plan approved. And so I'm a bit confused in terms of process about why we would open this conversation. While I understand there are people at the dais who feel strongly about this, I also know that there are community members who feel strongly about this, and I think that this will be a very involved and engaged citizenry as we have this conversation. And I'm thinking that the timing is very bad and that may confuse people with regard to their consideration of the general plan. So what I would like to do, I probably don't have any support for this, but what I'd like to do is make a motion to put off initiating this work until after the general plan election.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. I will oppose that. I think that you're trying to muddle the fact that we have unanimous approval and endorsement of our general plan. This is our specific action, just as if there were any element in any character that went overboard and that did not address those elements. If we want to speak to the motion at this time, the discussion of this and these topics is on the agenda, including specific text amendments that are very salient for the public. They can understand. If you choose to propose that the building shall remain 150 feet in these areas, then you can vote against the general plan if you choose to do that. And you can rally whatever forces you have. I will tell you that the public should have a general plan that at least recognizes that our council is correcting the problems that will lead us to unsustainability, traffic problems, and infrastructure, and a dilution of our tourism. Now, other people want to talk about the motion. We can vote on that. Go ahead, Ms. Littlefield.
Yeah, I won't be supporting that. I don't think that gives the right impression to folks that we want you to vote for the general plan. You go out there and vote for the general plan, but we don't want to tell you what we're going to do after you do that because we think you won't like it. That just doesn't sit well with me. We should be working, all of these things should be in conjunction with each other, and they should be in agreement with our citizens that this is what they want to do. I think we've noticed an area, the downtown character area plan, that needs work. It needs to be updated. It needs to be fixed. That doesn't negate what we want to see in the general plan. What it does, it should augment it. And we should make it so that they fit together and they build on each other. Not that we're afraid to do it because we're afraid citizens won't like it and they'll take out their anger on us by not voting for the general plan. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I can't go with that. I think we should be doing things that all work together in a unified whole and are consistent with each other. Thank you.
Councilmember Durham, on the motion, if you have a comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think that the November election is inconsistent or conflicts with the continued work on the Old Town Character Area Plan, because looking at the schedule in October and December, still going to be doing open houses and planning commission sessions, and we're not talking about council adoption on any of this until next March. So that's long after the general plan vote in November, so I don't see that there's any conflict on those. Just a couple of notes on things that I wanted to see addressed in the Old Town Character Area Plan. I think Councilmember Whitehead has mentioned most of them, but I have a hard time hearing behind these these plexiglass things. So I just wanted to very quickly hit some of the things I'd like to see considered. She mentioned open space, particularly creation of a public park along the canal. It's obviously we ought to have a public park along the canal. It's one of our best features. We're not using it, and there ought to be something there. The Emerald Necklace, we've talked about that many times. Not much has been done with it. It ought to be a big part of this plan. The bikeways ought to be integrated into the plan. That's certainly an important part of the infrastructure and transportation. I don't think there's much about bikeways or bicycles in the plan right now, so I'd like to see that. Finally, I would like to have a greater emphasis or discussion on ways to invigorate Old Town. I've mentioned before street fairs, things like that. I don't care what you call them, but we need to be creative in figuring out ways of getting people into Old Town. From the hotels, from other locations. We need to figure out ways of getting people into Old Town. So I would like to see some discussion of ways to invigorate Old Town. I think Councilmember Whitehead, mentioned the alleys. That's a possibility. Find ways for more public participation in Old Town. Using the alleys may be a way. Finally, I think part of that may be looking at the event ordinance, seeing if there are any ways that the event ordinance blocks us from fully utilizing Old Town spaces. So I know that that's probably something that's on our future agenda, but I would like to have some discussion in looking at the event ordinance as part of the Old Town Character Area Plan and seeing whether that's a blockade or something that inhibits activity in the Old Town. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman. The motion on the table and discussion has to do with the motion to postpone this Old Town Character Area Plan, and we have a second for that. So that's really where we're at right now. Councilwoman Caputi and then Councilwoman Whitehead.
I do think that I don't understand why we're rushing this conversation. I agree that this conversation needs to happen after the general plan goes out to the public. We need to have them approve it, and we need to see what their vision of the future is, a vision of the future that's been approved by the voters. This current Old Town Scottsdale Character Area Plan, as I've said before and has been mentioned tonight, it's been 30 years in the making. We've done extensive community outreach and planning. It's been regularly updated. It's community-based. It's flexible. We've had a unanimous city council adopt it. And I don't think that we can make a decision this important without involving the entire community again, and that means residents and local businesses and probably tourism experts and everyone who's going to be affected. I don't understand how we could possibly rush a conversation this important. As we're showing, even just amongst us, we have very different visions of what the future of our city looks like, especially our downtown. I agree that we can talk about improving quality and consistency of proposed development downtown, which is what we were told we were going to talk about tonight, and I think that's great. We can certainly entertain ideas about how to make our Old Town development better and more consistent, but I don't know that we're in a position to start getting so specific without going out to the community. That conversation that the speaker presented in the beginning, listing some of the wonderful projects that are coming forward in our city, I personally find those cause for celebration. I mean, I think it's a wonderful thing that we have investors willing to put their money in our city and move us forward into the future. I have a vision of downtown, as I've said many times, that's live, work, play, that's year-round, that's thriving. We need people to live here downtown so that we don't have open, empty lots and run-down spots, which are all over our city at the moment. I personally think that putting in some height and density in a downtown area makes sense. It decreases traffic because you're going to have more live, work, play options, which is the goal for the future of our city. And I want to just remind everyone, inside of our packet, it once again discusses the fact that our downtown area is one of 3 growth areas. Growth areas are considered to be primary economic engines for the community. Growth areas are locations identified by the community as areas best suited to accommodate future growth. Growth areas are intended to discourage sprawl and protect lower density residential neighborhoods from increased growth and development by focusing new development into these targeted areas that are most appropriate for accommodating a variety of land uses, enhanced infrastructure, and oriented to multimodal activity. Since 2001, the citizens of Scottsdale have identified Old Town, parentheses, downtown, as a community growth area. So we do have quite a few citizens that have identified our Old Town as a thriving, vibrant, year-round area, and I think that we need to get community input before we could possibly move forward on something this impactful to our community. Thank you.
Councilwoman Whitehead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Councilwoman Milhaven, I agree. We don't want to, jeopardize our general plan, but I think our citizens are pretty savvy, and I think our voters elected us to do multiple things, not just one thing at a time. They elected us assuming we could walk and chew gum. So we have gotten a lot done this year. Congratulations to all of my colleagues. And many of the things that we're moving forward are on, like the Emerald Necklace and the Tree Canopy Plan. These are things that are part of this Old Town Character Area Plan. So I am not concerned, and as far as public comment, we are initiating public comment, that is, and public involvement. That's exactly what we're doing right now. So I am confident that we can, we have 4 years that we're elected to serve our citizens, and we have to do many things during those 4 years. This is tied very closely to our general plan, and this is a great time to get citizen input and make some progress on the things that we know that unite us. I also want to say, when we started the general plan, we were all over the map. And gosh, we worked hard, but we ended up coming together, finding those areas of unity, finding ideas that maybe I had that weren't so good, that got knocked off, and everybody else, and we voted unanimously in support of it. We're going to do that again, I'm sure, here. We just have to start the process, and I'm looking forward to it. So I will not vote to deny, vote for the motion.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor Janik. Then I'll call the question.
Quickly, I don't know if anybody here has put more time in on the edits to the general plan than myself. And it's a wonderful general plan. It captures our vision. It does a terrific job of explaining everything. And we all came together and we really did a good job. I don't think that is at risk by the voters if we, in an organized, systematic fashion, with input from our fellow citizens who give great input, I think we can proceed with a minimum of disruption, basically, for the passage of the general plan. I think we're capable of that, and I do understand your concern. I definitely, Councilwoman Milhaven, I definitely understand it, but I'm hoping that we're mature enough that we can work around it and do both things at once. And I do believe there are several key ideas here that most of the citizens will really relish and want to see. So I think it might even propel the general plan to more general acceptance with consideration of some of these ideas. So thank you.
Okay, everyone has spoken on the motion.
I'd like to speak again, please.
Second, Ms. Milhaven, I see you asking.
Yes, thank you. I, too, hope that we can have a productive and collaborative conversation because I'm very proud of the work that we did on the general plan. However, I think this conversation will not be nearly as agreeable, particularly with the tone the mayor started the conversation with. And so if we're going to talk about some of the content of the plan, I would like to point out...
Excuse me, we're just talking on the motion, and we'll get back to the topic that's
You need a vote of the council to call the question.
I did. I said we will call a question.
No, you do not have... The council needs to vote to call the question.
We can talk about the particulars, which is on the agenda. You interrupted that by saying we should postpone it. Now you're saying you want to discuss the particulars. So it's better that we vote on that motion and then get back to any points you wish to say or make on the text and what's been on the agenda. That's my point. So I would ask that you stick to the motion, which is the postponement, which is you can discuss that, and then after that, up or down, we will get back to where we were in putting everything in motion.
The rules of procedure require a vote of the council to stop discussion. You may not call.
No,
you may not call the question
if that was
without
the
a vote
point
of the
of your alternate,
I would like to hear from the parliamentarian.
We will vote on the motion and the second, and that's my call because we have a motion and we have a second.
I would like to hear from the parliamentarian.
We can repeat the motion was to postpone till after the general plan. The second was for that, and we are ready to vote on whether we want to proceed with what we are agendized to do tonight. So, at this point...
So Robert's rules allows for me to make an objection to the procedure, and I choose to do that.
You choose to you made one motion already. Now you're trying to compound with the second motion.
No, I'm making a comment about the motion, and I'm adding to the discussion.
Okay.
You are not allowed, as the chair, to cut off discussion without a vote of the council.
Excuse me. Continue with your comment regarding why we should delay this why you should support your motion. That's what's on the table. Go ahead.
Thank you. What I was starting to say was that I hoped that this conversation around the downtown character area plan could be as agreeable and collegial as the general plan discussion was. But as we have just seen, there's a lot of heated emotion around here. And the mayor started out with a very aggressive tone, and I take exception to a great deal of what he said. He's trying to create a boogeyman where one doesn't exist. We do not have gridlock in our community. We do not have overburdened infrastructure. We do not have water problems. So I do not see that this discussion will be nearly as agreeable. The items that my colleagues mentioned about open space and trees and alleys and private partners and emerald necklaces and bike lanes, I think those are all good things to discuss, and I take no exception. But I do think that we may get into some areas that are quite contentious, that will ignite a community debate, that may create some confusion, not because the citizens aren't going to like what we do, but because there's going to be great debate around that. And yes, Councilwoman Whitehead, I can walk and chew gum at the same time. Okay. So my hope would be that
there is one motion on the table, and you have...
Excuse me, you cut me off. I'm not finished.
Okay, continue with your discussion.
So my hope would be that we could have a more collegial conversation, but it looks to me like that may be very challenging and would be best to put it off. Thank you.
Well, that's your opinion, and you wanted to delay the entire discussion to some future time, and at this point, we have a motion for you to delay, and all those in favor of the motion, aye. All those opposed, nay. Nay. Okay, we will continue with our discussion as posted for the public. And again, according to our discussion, confront the questions and ambiguities and be as helpful to staff as possible, so as these challenges are coming forward, we are not in denial that these subjects are not important, because they are. If there are any other comments, I have a few more to make as well, and I do believe that it can be cordial. I believe that the topic of cutting off the conversation has been answered, and we're going to continue the conversation. Part two of this discussion has to do with the conflicts of mapping and where the mapping imposes and is contradictory to the architectural standards that were proposed. That is a fact. I am suggesting that the staff verify whether that is a legitimate question, that type 1 going directly to type 3 is totally inappropriate or not. I am also suggesting that the insertion of type 2.5 is even more arbitrary and not necessary. So I'm suggesting that that be discussed. There is no case, as I know, that's pending or under any stress in that category, and yet that was arbitrarily inserted. I believe, I heard, I wasn't here at the time, but I heard it came in at the last part of the whole discussion. The other point that I believe should be tested is that whether or not in the Old Town character area, commercial downtown DO overlay and PB plan block development, where it is converting commercial property to 100% dwelling units. And I know apartment builders know how to build apartments. I know that. We know condo builders know how to build condos. But what we're dealing with in our town for vitality is a mixed use. So I am proposing that the mixed use have at least 20% of retail commercial use. That usually is at the ground floor. I don't believe that's asking too much. I believe it's consistent with a pedestrian walkable area. I don't think it's that contestable, but if someone believes I'm too emotional about that, I happen to have lived with that in our Old Town. I think it's very significant. And I think it would match up with the action that the council took so that we don't have another canal side eating up 98% of the commercial space on Fifth Avenue or Main Street or elsewhere. The other part of this discussion, as I pointed out several of the flaws, I would also point out in one particular case a project which did have walkways, conformed with most of the setbacks, all of the setbacks, step backs on Indian School. It broke some of the rules on 3rd Avenue, but that was the Triangle Building or the Kimsey project. It was deep enough, 400 feet, and it could meet those requirements, and it could fairly well assimilate to that. It happened to be about 72 feet, 74 feet. In my opinion, and when we test this, we will find out that the Type 3 would ask for 420% increase of the 36-foot height limit that we have downtown. That's what it's vested with as C2 property, the property that has not been rezoned yet. The Kimsey's an example, which went twice that, 72 feet, 74, within that 100% increase. It's being built, it's being invested in, it's successful in setbacks and stepbacks for the most part. Now, arguing that, oh, wow, it'd be even better if it was 160 feet or 190 feet doesn't make it better. I'm an architect. I've seen those kind of Taj Mahals end up being disasters. So that, I don't want to say standard, is another offshoot of what happened with the downtown Scottsdale character area plan. And it, in my opinion, now I hear from other people in the community say, Mayor Ortega, keep it at 36 feet. How dare you go above 36 feet? And I have other ones saying, oh, I love 160 feet. That's the greatest. We're going to be the metropolitan future of this whole valley now. They're going to want to come and join us here. Okay, so I have all of that happening, and all I have is empirical data. That's why I pointed out the flaws of some of these other projects where the marquee busted the rules. And by the way, the collective, the hotel that's being built, is short 126 spaces, and it was approved last year by saying, well, we have extra 126 spaces on another hotel nearby, and now we're going to zero them out. I mean, that just blows my mind. How that can ever be justified. It's true what Councilwoman Milhave said. Well, the council can vote for it. That doesn't make it practical. That doesn't make it efficient sustainability. It doesn't solve all those things. And in the end, they're going to come back to the council and say, oh my gosh, what did you do to us? And why did that get piled on? So as we go forward, I'm going to ask that some mapping and other discussions come forward. I believe that the type 1 can be increased by maybe 4 feet, from 36 to 40 feet. That just allows for a little more structure that they might have a little breathing room to do something with. Type 1. Type 2, probably, and this is an ordinance area that can be discussed, and people will throw rocks one way or the other, and they'll say, I believe type 2 can probably be accomplished at 52 feet. Type 3, if it exists, would probably be 60 feet with a bonus of 12. What happens when you have a bonus? Well, the developer has to earn it. In this case, they saved the Kimsey building. There were certain things, walkways. There was a certain balance. Is it the greatest? Yes or no? It seemed to be an example that I can point to and say, it can be reasonably done. But if they had tried, remember, they were at 90 feet plus before, and they reduced it by 20 feet. They were at 94 feet, and we can make it at 74 feet, make money, bring vitality, etc. So those are practical examples that I believe help us test whether or not something could and can evolve in a good way and in a responsible way, because that's our job. I don't want to overload the streets. I don't want to overload, again, I believe that there's been a patchwork of saying, well, we approved this project, and now so-and-so has to run their sewer line 3 miles just to tap in. Well, that's a huge problem. It shouldn't be my problem as a city, because eventually they're going to say, you need to upgrade your sewer system to handle another 30,000 people in this area. And that's an encumbrance on everybody who, in my opinion, I'm with them. I'm not for this great, grandiose metropolitan future. It's what people ran away from, and we can do better. And as you know, Scottsdale is one of the most successful cash flow cities in the valley, and we've done it without going way, way overboard and breaking the system that supports it. That's my input on mapping. I think any of us can provide, and I would welcome the public to look at these, to read the document and think of it, because that's our job, is to reanalyze it against what is practical. And I will say one last thing. I have seen the city of Scottsdale planners, staff show the variance of setbacks and the violations of those architectural plans. And it's true, council can say, well, we don't care anymore. Let's go 20 stars and forget the setbacks. But what I'm getting to is I've seen the staff do their job in identifying where those critical things were. And I've seen them shake their heads after, hey, they just blew a big hole in our architectural stuff and, our guidelines. And to me, that's inappropriate. It's got to be corrected. I'm willing to step into it. And I know my colleagues are. Because if you think the Old Town Character Area Plan, I don't think anyone up here will say it's perfect, right? Do you think the way it was written 3 years ago is perfect? Of course not. So let's work together. Let's get something done. And with that, I think we don't have an action item per se. So we could, I don't see any other requests from council people. Can you conclude? And then Councilwoman Caputi has a comment.
Yeah, thank you again, Mayor. You do have an action item this evening.
Okay.
You need to make the consideration on the screen here, which is initiate the general plan amendment and the text amendments, as well as initiate amendment to the downtown infill incentive district.
Excuse me, so moved. I move that we proceed.
Second. I'll second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
I still had a comment from the
We have a motion that I made, and if you want to comment on the motion to proceed.
No.
Okay. Thank you. City Attorney, and do I need to read this just directly as it's moved, or is that too informal?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify your motion. I don't think you have to read it verbatim, that you're moving to initiate A, B, and C as shown on the slide.
Yes.
Up on the screen right now. I think it's the second to last page in the PowerPoint. I'm sure that we can include this slide in the minutes to make the motion clear, and also directing staff on item D to update the Old Town Scottsdale Urban Design and Architectural Guidelines. Is that correct? Do I understand the motion correct?
Yes, exactly.
And is that also the intention of the second?
I just want to add, and I'll see if the mayor agrees with this. It says motion to take some of the direction we've given you on the on things that need to be added. Thank you.
There may be, again, Councilwoman Caputi. You have a comment?
Yeah, I'm just still not comfortable that we're finished with this conversation. Again, we need more people in our downtown, so I just don't understand how we're having this conversation about decreasing the 1 out of 3 growth areas that we have in our city. So it's been brought up here tonight about this, we don't have enough infrastructure, we don't have enough water. I would like to, if staff's going to be looking into things, I want staff to help dispel that idea, because this seems to be a community boogeyman. And I don't think people have the right information right now to be able to make a good decision, because we've somehow, some of us have convinced them that we can't grow because we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the water, and I think that's false, and I think we need to present some facts to go up against that. I'd love to also see a long-term plan showing what the downtown looks like if we go backwards. I mean, if we go backwards and we move zoning back to 1980s levels, I would love to see a projection, an economic projection for what our city looks like moving forward. How do we pay for all these wonderful things that everyone on council wants? We want bike paths, and we want open spaces, and we want parks, and we want beautiful things, and I want them too. But we have to find a way to pay for these things, and I disagree with the mayor. I don't think we have a sustainable model going forward if we move everything back, close the door, and stop everything right now. We have to move forward into the future. We have to generate revenue. People are not going to come here and build 2-story buildings in our downtown area, and we're just not going to have the revenue to move forward. I grew up in Boston. when I come into Scottsdale, I just want to say that I don't feel like I'm in Boston. Scottsdale looks nothing like Boston or New York or LA, and it's not going to look like that ever. And if there are people on this dais who actually think our downtown looks like Boston or New York, I'm going to challenge you to take some more vacations, because I'm just not seeing it. I'm sorry. I would like to see staff, though. If we're going to come back and have staff present things to us, I do want to see some of these myths dispelled, because we've got to have some facts in order to make good decisions here.
Councilwoman Whitehead, and then we'll take a vote.
Okay, I'll just be really quick. First of all, this is moving us forward, and I'm very, very excited. And I think that one of the problems is that we haven't negotiated the public benefit with past development, and that has created a lot of rage. We definitely do have a water shortage, so I think anybody who's been to any of the lakes and sees the bathtub ring, so to even question that, I have to wonder about. I look forward to working with our development partners. We have wonderful developers in this town, and we saw that with Kimsey. We're in no shortage of projects that are moving forward. Some I voted for, some I adamantly opposed, but they're all moving forward, and that's what we as a council decided, and I'm enthusiastic about all of them. But I think we can, it shouldn't be an adversarial thing, but we need to talk about with our partners, with our private partners, what can we do to make it more valuable for all of us? And I'll just end, even though I'm not the architect up here on the dais, that less is more many times. And I'm looking forward to seeing what more we can do with this plan to make it better for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, and I will conclude with this statement, and then we'll take our vote. The subject of no growth and absolutely no growth is one of the total falsehoods that can be made. I have never advocated for that, and for someone to say that it's zero growth and therefore no viability is also on one deep end of the discussion. I expect that we'll be coming in positive conclusions, and I've expressed that we do expect investment to continue. All in favor, indicate your vote. Any opposed? Okay. The motion passes.